Can you hear me? Thanks, John. That was perfect timing. I see Martin was asking at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. He's an academic. He moved to industry to be an HPC AI consultant. Education, training, and people development is a core part of his role. And I met Martin on the SIG HPC Education Leadership chapter. In the chat, he says he's going to be back, but that was 10 minutes ago. I'm not sure if he is back. But we can use this time because we had time available for discussion and questions. Martin, just shout when you're available. But otherwise, I don't know if at this point anyone has any questions. To use the time meaningfully, I will share the last bit of slides I was going to do, which was at the wrap-up. So you can all see the screen there. So I mentioned the SIG HPC chapter. That is the official special interest group in high performance computing, which is an ACM chapter. And there's the education chapter of that. And I am currently, for the second term, the African regional chair, because there's no one else that wants to do it. But what we'd like to see is more representation. I am very vocal about these things and making sure that Africa has a seat at the table. So we do a lot of activities throughout the year. One of the things that kind of was spearheaded by us was the global seminar series. We're looking for content. So every year we have each region host a seminar in their time zone, but everyone else can join. And typically Africa is always at the worst time zone for these sort of things. So now we have our own dedicated slot. The VIT kids are going to be presenting at one of those sessions as well. But we also have a blog. And I volunteered, signed up, whatever, to manage the blog. I'm looking for any content related to HPC education for that blog. You can showcase your research, your papers, your publications, topics, whatever you'd like. That's part of the blog. And then, of course, we're really trying to drive the recruitment for this because actually, if you're a member of the SIG HPC, you get discounted international conferences as well. So it's like a $35 membership fee, and you'll save $400 just to go to PERC, and you'll save $600 just to go to SC. There is the annual meeting on January the 15th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll leave that up until I hear from Martin to say that he's available. And we can also use this time for any questions or comments while we wait for Martin. Oh, yes, I'll mention there, the survey is really important because we don't get enough feedback about what you want out of a session like this. So we go with what we think are aligned themes. But it's quite a mixed bag of themes and topics because the community is not that vocal in Africa. So we would really appreciate your feedback about this session, but also about what you'd like to see in the future. And like I say, we have these global seminar series, so we can actually focus on topics that are of interest to you or of relevance to you. Martin, how do you want to share the slides? Are you going to do it remotely, or do you want us to present them here? Yeah.
Well, let's see if this sharing within Teams thing actually works. If not, I'll pop them in the chat, Brian, and
cool. You
can take it from there. So let's just see whether the magic works. Okay. Can you see that?
Not on our side. How do we display the Teams thing here? If it's a big hack, then Martin can just upload the slides so that people can see what he's sharing on the Teams. Teams not that one. Okay. Oh, cool. Perfect.
Can you do that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Super. Excellent. So, hello everybody. Thanks for that introduction. So so my name's Martin Callahan. I currently work for a company called Red Oak Consulting in the UK. But I have been a HPC manager, running the HPC service, research software engineers, and a training program for graduate researchers, as I said, at the University of Leeds. Then I became an academic, a lecturer for a couple of years, but decided I didn't like that very much, and went off to industry to do interesting industry things in consulting, particularly around AI, HPC, and cloudy type stuff. So it is possible you can go from universities into industry, and it's different. Let's put it that way. So I've been involved with SIG HPC education chats, which Brian has just probably taken the wind out of my sails on, but I'll go through some of those things in a little bit more detail. and see whether this is the type of thing that more people are interested in becoming involved in. And I think, as Brian definitely did say, we are very keen to encourage wider membership outside of North America. And that's, I think, key to making the chapter vibrant and exciting. So a little bit about who we all are. So you can see Brian there, bottom right-hand corner, and there's me on the bottom. And with a range of other people, not related. Scott Callahan is chair, Veronica Fillinger, Georgia Stewart, Anna Maria, Dave Joyner, me, Fatima and Brian together are the officers. We meet up every month or so, and we look to get people involved and to plan exciting things. So a little bit about the chapter. So essentially, the education chapter is part of ACM SIGHPC. You see all things computer science education, training and outreach. And in the membership, and particularly amongst the officers, all of those, if you like, interests are represented. There's around about 50 or 60 active members. One of the things that we'd love to do during 2025 is to increase that, maybe even to double it. And we host a whole range of activities for knowledge exchange, all sorts of community building stuff. We run very well attended workshops at supercomputing and at PERC, and occasionally we've had workshops at ISC in Germany. We have a regular series of webinars and panels, and irregular informal meetings as well, particularly when interesting things arise from those webinars and panels. We'll set up a number of meetings and we can discuss further. And on top of that, we have a yearly award for excellence in computer science education. And that's something that this year round was awarded on the main stage at supercomputing. So it's quite a big thing. So that's the chapter. So a little bit about some of the events that we do. So in the past year, we've run webinars, and we run these live usually, and they're available for catch up afterwards. A webinar with an update on HPC carpentry, which I think some of you are aware of in the room. Another webinar on Code Refinery, which, if you've not met Code Refinery, you can think of it as quite similar, but perhaps goes into detail a little bit more than software carpentry. So it's a little bit like a deep dive. We ran a really interesting panel on Horsey Supercomputing Centre's internships. So to give the interns an opportunity to talk about what they'd learned, the new skills that they developed. And finally, a very interesting webinar. Again, some of you are going to be aware of Magic Castle, which is a really cool tool for spinning up on-demand HPC infrastructures in the cloud, and a great sort of thing to do when you need HPC, but you're in a resource-constrained environment. And we heard some really interesting things about that. So that's the type of thing that we do. And as I mentioned, on top of that, lots and lots of opportunity for informal meetings and sharing of resources too. So looking ahead to the next year, so this is probably where there's a bit of an ask for attendees today. The workshops that we run are really, really very well attended. So I think what we need to do is work out how to convince more people to join. So I mentioned there's about 50 or 60 active members, but workshops can easily have 150 or 200 attendees. So if you're not a member of SIGHPC or SIGHPC Education, Brian earlier on mentioned all of the benefits. So I'm not going to reiterate those, but there are some really cool benefits to joining, and the fact that you join a wider community of people and get the chance to join in. So we are going to host a bunch of webinars further in 2025, and one that is coming up quite soon is one on generative AI tools to support education and training around HPC and ComSci education. Again, another ask, and Brian mentioned this as well, that we really want to encourage more people outside of North America. There's far more exciting stuff going on in Europe and Africa, the Middle East and Asia. So we want to try and encourage more people to join and more people to speak up and to tell us what you're actually doing. And, you know, we can give the North Americans a bit of a run for their money, I think. And we are constantly looking for organisations to collaborate with. So think beyond you as an individual. If you or the organisation that you're a member of does want to collaborate, does want to talk perhaps about something more detailed in terms of curriculum development, then do speak up. We're particularly interested in encouraging people to share materials, particularly training materials, and to share the development burden as well. I think we know from our own experience that that's the hardest bit. And if we've got the opportunity to share and discuss, it really does take the load off people. And we're also very keen as well to encourage people from industry to join in. Very similar issues in industry that people in industry don't often get the chance to talk about. So if you or any of your colleagues are in industry, then again, please do get in touch. We're more than happy to talk about how you can support us and how we can support you. And final few things. So this is where everybody gets the cameras out and starts snipping away at those QR codes. So we do have a website where everything's published. We've got a Slack channel, bottom right-hand corner, where you can participate in conversations. And bottom left-hand corner, the really interesting bit, if you want to become a member, there should be a link there to a form as well. Is that Brian? Is that Brian showing everybody with the cameras out? Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody. Brian's just shared me a photo of everybody that's in the room today. So I think that's it from me, Brian.
Can you hear me? Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. There you go. So yeah, it's been an interesting challenge to, I sent that photo because, like Martin was describing, these workshops or sessions get really well attended.
Brian disconnects me.
Oh, what? So what I was saying is exactly what Martin's describing. Our sessions are really well attended. Like, I sent that photo here now because there's a large group of people here and I wanted Martin to see. But our active membership for something like the African HBC education group is very small. The membership is about 15 people and activity is very low. But there's a reason everyone is here. I don't know what that reason is. That is one of the purposes behind that survey, is to find out the reason. But, you know, we're not you. So we need to know what it is that brought you here. And you're welcome to share that now in the remaining couple of minutes or ask questions. I know John had a question for the group about if anyone else is facing the same challenge of vetting people for training and how you've approached that and how you've solved it. John's over the wire thing is actually pretty cool. I think there's one or two people that have had a look already and they like it. I'm not going to mention Benjamin sitting in the front. But yeah, we would really like to figure out how to get more people actively involved beyond these 90-minute sessions once a year, right? And I've done a lot of talking, so I'm leaving it over to all of you. If you have any comments for any of the people that spoke online or anyone that spoke here, or if you have any questions, and I'm starting off with that why you here thing, and also John's question as well. Otherwise, you can sit here in silence for 8 minutes. The best question also gets this laptop at the end. Well, the Eswatini laptop was customs. I had to take it home. There's a question in the front. Oh, there's a mic. You can run around with it as well, since you're the assistant. Thanks.
Thank you. My question is for Jay in his talk, reproducibility. Is that becoming more of a requirement for papers in the scientific field? Because obviously you might want to reproduce something and the results might be there and they might give like a diagram of the code, but I mean, Is this becoming more of a requirement? I mean, for journal papers and conferences and whatnot?
It's not becoming a requirement as fast as I would like it to, but it is becoming a requirement in more and more venues.
So yeah, it's becoming a requirement more often, but the growth in the number of places that want that as a requirement is slow. Part of it is that SC people look at it and say, "Hey, look, they're very successful with the reproducibility," and the reality is that it's a not really working disaster that has a really good face on the front to make it look like it's working. So once people dive in and start to look at things, they realize, "Oh, wait, this is really hard." And they don't want to turn people off from getting their publications submitted. And so it's something that places that are wanting to drive higher standards are starting to say, we want this, and we need several of the top venues, be them conferences or journals, start to require it. And to that point, then it starts to become part of things. So the machine learning community has the ML Commons pieces that are trying to drive a lot of the reproducibility standards, but those are only being adopted by a few places that publish machine learning work. So, and if those standards are high enough is also a question that we also need to answer, and can we adopt those more broadly? So it's definitely a work in progress, but there are the seeds that are starting to drive it, which is what gives me hope and trying to get more awareness so that more people try to pay attention to it. So it's really what I'm trying for here.
Maybe just a follow-up as well. You also mentioned the people will obviously might cite you a lot more if you can actually reproduce that work, which is, I think, is really useful for students and researchers to actually know to improve your status and standing. So anything, or make comments on it as well, like how to, we have a lot of students here as well, how to, get that, background and how to make sure your work's more reproducible.
One of the big things you can do is to have people in your lab try to redo your work. And don't have them rerun things that take a long time or something, but you can just start with simple things and say, "Hey, I got this to work and it works this way. Can you try it on your machine and see what you get?" And that way it ends up being kind of a crowdsourced thing. Another thing you can do is the student that I got started working on the reproducibility with, Ivo Jimenez, he put together a thing he called the Popper Convention. And it was a structure for working on research projects that helped you have everything scripted and in version control, and automatically generated your diagrams, your figures, and your research paper pieces. And everything got driven out of the version control. So something like that can also help. And that's not the only framework that works like that. There are others as well, but the Popper Convention ended up working really well. So those are other things that can help as well. And the other piece that we have found in the adoption of using those kinds of tools is that students will realize very quickly, hey, this gets me to a productive point of doing my work faster. And they start to see it as an advantage, and just as a side effect, they end up generating all the reproducibility.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other topics? It's supposed to be a buff, so any start a discussion and roll with it. So,
and we managed to overcome a lot of technical difficulties. So I have a question relating to doing your training. Do a lot of you do HPC education and training using cloud resources or remote systems for the training? Or have you invented your own way of doing it similar to the virtual cluster that we've developed where you download it and run it on a local machine? Okay, maybe by a show of hands, how many of you do most of your training on a cloud if you're doing any sort of computational training? Clearly no one. So how many of you are doing any training? Okay. Would any of you like to share about how you conduct your training? And whether you're delivering it or participating in it, how do you normally do it?
Thank you, Rockstar. So one can do classroom education, and you need to prepare and so on. But a lot of the questions that I get, but particularly to do with HPC, are extremely focused. It's focused on the task that the student themselves or the researcher wants to do. So the training comes from there. It spins out, and one needs to identify the shortest path for them to get going, because they're not interested in really learning about HPC. They want to do their research. So from that point of view, this tends to be focused as far as we're concerned. However, I don't think it's adequate, especially if one's dealing with entry-level people who don't have the basics and don't have the foundation, and it trips you up. So one needs to do you need to do both. As far as cloud is concerned, cloud costs, and you have to pay with your credit card, so it's out. We just cannot do it.
So a follow-up to that actually is, I've lost it. I had a follow-up. It just blanked. It's about training the people. No, give me a minute.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe an important point gentleman just mentioned was some people don't actually want to know about HPC. They just want to do the research and use the resources, which is an important consideration to, take note of as well, just to allow them to know the basics and then, move on from that. But you need to know some HPC, some bash.
Yeah, containers, singularity containers, and Podman, and so on HPC helps a lot when it comes to rapid deployment of resources for people, where it's not a fiddly thing and it just works. But it also comes with a kickback. If there are library issues with your container, you have to maybe open the container in order to change it, and so editable containers are actually a requirement. I think that point was made earlier as well. That you need to have the definitions of the container as well as the container, so that you can edit it and change it if you have to, and you might have to,
I remember my follow-up question was actually, you're dealing with people that you say are struggling with HPC at some fundamentals. I mean, so I know some units use what they effectively call a driving test for a cluster. And I've been pushing for that locally as well, where we shouldn't give users accounts on the full system until they've shown that they have some expertise or knowledge of the basics. And that's also what John is talking about when he spoke about his presentation there.
Yeah, I thought that is very interesting from a scientific point of view. This is like, what is science, and the issue of reproducibility and falsifiability kind of gets murky. I mean, what one is doing is science, but not as you'd know it, not as we know it. A lot of it is very descriptive. We're building methodology rather than doing science at this stage. And I think that once we get past the difficulties of building these methodologies, then we'll be able to do more formal science, proof in a way, like as in a mathematical proof, so that you don't get this situation where 100 papers are published, but based on some fictitious thing, that misleads everybody, wastes resources. And it happens. One finds errors that were published years ago that somebody discovers. I mean, there must be a lot of them out there somewhere.
Quantum computing. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was a very interesting article.
So we are at the 3 o'clock time. So officially we should end, right? If you want to carry on the discussion, some of us might linger, or you catch us at coffee or whatever. Otherwise, if you join the Slack that John was talking about, the Ecosystems Workspace, it started as a community for African recipients of HPC systems, but that's just a glorified e-waste disposal project if it weren't for the community and the training that goes with it. So I don't know if any of the slides have a link to that, John, but if you go to the Ecosystems website, you can find it. If you just Google for Ecosystems CHPC, there's a website, and the first link there, Getting Started, is a link to join the Slack workspace.